Hello, welcome to the July 22nd, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through, and then we'll go ahead and begin. Hello, welcome to the July. Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. Once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America, primarily focusing on Steinberg products, and I'll be the host for the live stream. I'm presenting from outside of Alexandria. I'm outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States, in Alexandria, Virginia. If you're watching this live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you come from. And if you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions by entering it into the chat field or by simply sending questions in advance to the live stream by emailing clubcubase@steinberg.de. So we'll try to get through all the questions chronologically as they come in. My ability to answer the questions in real time will soon be diminished, but I'll try to catch up as best I can throughout the live stream. But if you don't get an immediate response to questions, just realize that I will try to catch up. So it's hard to actually get all the questions in a real-time manner. I may be 20 to 30 minutes behind at certain points, but I'll work my best to get through all of the different questions. And when asking questions, if you could specify if you're running like Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, if you're running version 10, 11, or 12, if you're running on Mac or PC, that information is helpful. So as we'll go ahead and get started, and we should have all the topics covered in the index tonight, and that will be timestamped, so you could jump immediately to different areas. We also will, and if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to actually compile the question. I think he emailed me that I saw a message that we may cross over 19,000 questions today since we started with doing the live streams during the pandemic. So I'm going to give a special thanks to Jan. We have two people to serve as moderators, Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do this to make it a better environment for everyone involved. So we want to give special thanks to them. And another wonderful resource of information for Steinberg users is the Cubase Nation Discord, and Jazz Dude does a lot of compiling information for that. So we'll give special thanks to him there. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we have a question. All right, so we see Uno Momento checking in. We have Tata Digital Studio asks, greetings and happy weekend, Mr. Greg. Please, how can one make a bass to sound wider, matching with kick? Thanks. So sometimes, if we wanted to take a particular... Say if I wanted to take this particular bass and make it kind of fit with kick. So sometimes what people will do is a sidechain compression. So let's say, one way of, if you want the bass to kind of, and to be kind of glued in a bit more with the particular kick, what you could do is just come over here and let's put a compressor on. We'll go to let's say an insert here. And I'll just put a dynamics, and we'll just put standard compressor, and we'll activate kind of the side chain. So we'll come here and we'll just say, we'll activate the side chain, and we'll set our side chain source, and we'll just set it to kick. So now every time that the kick comes in, we could have the bass kind of compress. So at that point, you could do different sidechain compression. So let's say as we're kind of playing now, if I wanted to just take, and I'll just bring the gain up here. So now every time that the kick would come in, we could activate the sidechain here. So we could just kind of do different things with creative sidechaining. I'm sorry about my audio. My audio interface decided to miscooperate right before the live stream. So let me just see if I get the sounding just a little, some gain structure set a little better here. But so try just, you know, doing like sidechain input. Let me adjust my audio cables here just for a moment. All right, so we may have kind of less than stellar sounding audio. I apologize for that, but at least we could hear something for demonstration purposes. Okay, so let's go ahead. Okay, so we see James just said he just emailed a couple questions in, so I'll see if I could. Yeah, but if you just want to ask the questions in the chat, it's a little easier for me. Okay, so we see Matt Elliston from London. We see Sable Winters checking in from Bay Area, I believe Oakland. We go Dallas LaRue from Las Vegas. We go to Sandwich, UK, checking in from England. We see Michael Pierce checking in from London as well. Okay, so we have a first question from James is there a way to record arm a MIDI or instrument channel and at the same time unarm any other record arm channels? At the moment, I have to manually go through each track to do this. So let's say if we have a number of tracks. So I think we could do this with the Project Logical Editor. So let's say if we wanted to come over here to the Project Logical Editor, we could come over to our setup and we'll say, I'll just start from scratch. So we'll say our container type is equal to track. Okay, so we could just say, okay, we're going to say our container type is equal to track, and on our action, we want to go to track operation, and we could say record. So if you wanted to just disable, we could just save that as a particular preset. So now, you know, if you had a number, you know, if you wanted to just take, so let's say now I have this selected, and if I had other tracks recorded enabled, if I wanted to clear that, we could just trigger that. And, you know, if we go to preferences, one of the preferences you could do is just come here and we'll say, I think it's under project and mix console. So you could say enable record on selected audio or MIDI tracks. So let's say if I, at this point, I clear all of the record enabled tracks, and then, you know, whatever track you select can then automatically be record enabled. So, but if you have a number of different ones, so you could just in the operations choose transform, container type is equal to tracks, and you can say track operation record disable. So if you wanted to also, you may also, let's say if you didn't have those preferences set up, you could probably even go a step further and say, we're going to have tracks, and we'll say that the property is that the track is selected, and then we want to toggle. So let's say if I don't have that particular preference set up and I have this track selected, I could just come and let's say I had other tracks that were record enabled. We could say, you know, take any tracks that are, you know, and we could just choose if we wanted those to be to take the selected tracks and toggle, or we could just remove this and just say, okay, we want to take all of the track settings here and toggle, but it probably would make sense just to clear any other record enabled tracks, and then whatever track you select after that could automatically be record enabled. Okay, so we have a question from Jesse Carmichael. Curious if we could dive in a bit what kind of creative manipulation of audio we can do in the sampler and the best workflow for organizing and saving sample instruments. Okay, good to see you, Jesse. Hope you're well. Okay, so let me see if I have a project still in my, okay. All right, so with the sampler track, you know, we could drag any audio directly into the sampler. So let's say I just had one particular note here. Okay, so if we had that and I go to like an empty sampler track, I could just take like a single note or any audio that I want. So at this point, if we wanted to adjust, you know, our different filters, I apologize, my audio is not so great today. I just had to use the built-in audio on my Mac. But, you know, we could have kind of different filters. So if you wanted, or if you wanted to do LFOs for volume, so let's say we could, and once we do this, we could just say, okay, if once we click on, we have like kind of a whole modulation page here. So we can say, okay, I just want it now to come over here and be able to adjust the filters. Or if we wanted to have our modulation, we can say, okay, let's activate this for LFO 1, and I wanted to adjust the volume. You know, we could adjust kind of our volume or panning via the LFOs that we see here. So if we wanted to just say, okay, I just want to take LFO 1, and we could set that to volume, and you know, we could increase this with our modulation wheel. We could have a separate LFO, and we could use these LFOs also for different filters for pitch. Then once we get to the particular point where we want to save, and this is going to be kind of for single samples. If you wanted to do more extensive sampling, you could get into Groove Agent or Hallion. But really all you'd have to do at this point is save a track preset. So once we come over here, you have this all set up. You just save a track preset, and then that could be called into any other track that's available or any other project that you want. Okay, so we just see what is the best Waves plugin template for vocals for Cubase LE Elements 11. So I don't have any Waves plugins, so you know, but if I was in, you know, Cubase LE, you know, I'm not sure which version you're in, but you know, I think, you know, depending on which version you're in, that you're going to have noise gates like in the built-in channel strip. You have compressors. You're going to have tools for de-essing, so you'll have saturation and limiters plus EQ. So you could come over here and have pretty much all of the tools that you would need without having to utilize third-party plugins. So I would just use kind of the actual built-in tools, and you know, just standard compression, EQ, and you know, if you wanted to have, you know, different reverbs as sends, you know, maybe start with a plate reverb and a delay, then, you know, using the built-in ones, you should be all set to go. All right, we see Victor Kane is on the live stream. And one of the things that you'll also notice, and Jazz Dude points this out, so if you wanted to just come over here, if you go to media, you'll have track presets. So as you come here, we could just say, okay, we want to go to presets, and let's go to track presets, audio, and then you could say, okay, let's come over here, and we want it for vocals or kind of whatever. We'll just choose our category here. So, and then as you come over here to vocals, you could see a number of different track presets that are specifically done for vocals. All right, we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas. All right, we see Peter checking in from Montreal. All right, we see Mark Rabin, and Sella is with him, so that's good. All right, we see Best Korean Jesus on the live stream. Okay, so we have a question from VTX Rudy. Says a question, Cubase 12 artist, Windows 11 from Chicago. Can you please explain how to favorites in the right zone? So let's say you have a particular folder that you have kind of like maybe go to drum samples. So we'll come over here and look at our file browser. So let's say, okay, I really like my drum loops in this particular folder. So I can say, when I start, I want to quickly, instead of having to go into, multiple folders here. So let's say if I go into documents and I go to projects and let's navigate to Groove Agent. So let's say I have these particular, and I want this as my favorites folder. So if instead of having to navigate through nested folders constantly to get to that particular folder, all I have to do is click on right click and we'll say add favorites. So I'll just call this loops. All right, so now when I navigate home, I could now just click on favorites, and then we could just say, okay, we'll just come right over here and we'll say loops July 22nd, and I could just navigate to that particular folder without having to go through my file browser and navigate through 6 or 7 subfolders to get to the particular folder. So just right click on a folder once you're in the file browser, and then as you right click on it, you could choose add favorite, and then it's going to be just kind of one click away under the favorites category right there. So let me know if that helps. All right. So we see from Abernay Studios, my question is how to align the percussion hits in general when they are not completely aligned. All right. So let's say if we had like some different, percussion stuff that was not going to be aligned, so one of the things you could do is, so if it's on, one of the things I would do is maybe if you're in Cubase 12, you go to the free warp right here in the project window. Earlier versions, we could do this directly on kind of in the sample editor, but I could just kind of place my warp markers here. So let's say, okay, I want my warp marker here, and, as we look at this, and one of the tricks is you want to place have a warp marker, before or after the actual event. So if I wanted this percussion to, if it was a little late or a little early, we could just kind of move those particular elements of the sound so that, let me just And as we moved like this warp tool, and we see that to the left arrow, we'll see a little vertical line that now we can move that, and we could snap that to the musical grid if we wanted to. But anything that we do here, we could just move just kind of that easily, and we could stretch. So if stuff is off in time a little bit, free warping will be your great tool. And if you don't have 12, if you go into the sample editor and then click on audio warp, we could see these warp markers. But if you don't want to manually populate, if we come over here, we could adjust kind of hit points, and then we could create warp markers from those hit points. And now when you go to free warp, these will all be populated for us, so we can move and we could add warp marker points. So let me know if that is helpful. Okay. There we see Jesse Carmichael has also made a keyboard shortcut to disable all record-enabled tracks. So, all right. So Uno Memento is giving a cold beer to everyone in Finland today. So it's 30 degrees Celsius there. So it's about 86, I think, in American. All right, so Sir Robert, great to see you from Atlanta, and he says that he's hit the like button. So thanks for doing that. I hope you're well. All right, so we see question: is there a file name and details on what Cubase version I produced it? A lot of files. So a lot of times the Cubase file, you could open up a Cubase file from SX1 and still load it into Cubase 12, so it's still the same file format. So I don't know if there's a way to let's take a look if in MediaBay, if it indicates which version the file was created in. But the project file is kind of version independent. We'll call it version agnostic, if you will. But let me come over here and say, let's go and see if it's maybe indicated in MediaBay. And let's just look for projects here. May not be indicated. Yeah, so I don't think it's going to be that you can tell which version of like a .cpr file was created in. But, since it is a multi-generational file, but sorry about that. All right, so it's just see a question. Hello, Greg. When doing film scoring, how can I sidechain my score to the film audio? Okay, so if we have it all set to different groups, so let's say I have, and I'll just jump back to a different project here. All right, so let's say these tracks are my score, and I'm going to route these to a particular group channel. So I'm going to say add track, and let's add a group channel to the selected channels. And I'm going to activate the project so we could do that. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll just say, okay, we want these particular tracks to be routed to group channel. So, and we'll call this, let's say, the score. And let's say if we have dialogue or, other sound effects tracks. So we'll make this group channel. All right, so we'll just call this dialogue FX and sound design. All right, so then all you'd have to do is to kind of place, depends what you want to go down, but let's say if I want, my score to go down based on the dialogue tracks, we could, on this particular group track, we can put a compressor, and we'll just come over here to the compressor, and then we could sidechain this particular compressor to the other group. So, and so at that point now we, if you wanted the soundtrack to, duck down and compress dynamically and sidechain from the other audio sources, you could just do that. So we could apply a compression so that, as the dialogue is coming in, that the music tracks can duck down. So that's a pretty typical workflow for a lot of that. So a lot of dialogue is going to be you doing a tremendous amount of side chaining for different things to make the dialogue always heard. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. How can I change all channels from balance to combine panning at once? So let's take a look. I think let's add some stereo tracks. Okay, so let's say we have these tracks. And we wanted to change their panning all at once from different types. So let's go ahead and let's see if I activate. So I have these tracks selected, and let's see if I activate. Yeah, so it doesn't look like the quick link works. But I think that there is a preference. So you might have to change them one by one. But I think if we go to, there might be a preference for which panner is loaded up by default. Let me just see if there's. And let me just see if I could. Okay, so you could, if you go to VST here, you could just kind of change so that you could have it go to the combined panner to start with. But I think otherwise you might have to kind of change the panners one by one to do that. But if you always want it to be the combined panner, you could just have that as a default by going into preferences and then going into VST, and you could choose which panner opens up by default. So sorry, you can't change multiple ones simultaneously, or I don't know a way. Okay, so I just see a question. When I put a kick in the sample track and I want to do a roll, it doesn't follow the MIDI pattern and it does the normal kick without a roll. What am I doing wrong? Okay, so let's say if we come over here, we'll just add all right, so, and I will just make this into a sampler track. Okay, so now, if I just kind of place this into, so say, we'll go ahead and solo this particular track, so. And I'll just switch my editor here. So I'm not sure how you're putting the roll in, but let's say. Okay, so when we go to our sampler track here. Okay, so let's say I want to put it on C3. I'll just kind of switch to drum editor here so we can get at it quickly. All right, so now we can say. Just erase those quickly. So let's say, okay, I want to put in quarter notes, or let's say half. Now we'll do quarters. To eighths. And let's say sixteenths. All right, so now we just kind of have this program. So let's say. So that seems to kind of be working as expected here, but let me know if that's how you're actually putting the rolls in, and if it's just kind of like a one shot, but seems like it's kind of playing. Okay, so it just says when I put, so just rereading it, I want to do a roll. It doesn't follow the MIDI pattern, and it does the normal kick without a roll. So I'm not sure if it's a particular MIDI pattern that you're kind of working with it, but let me know if it's what MIDI pattern is being kind of dragged over, or if I did it a completely different way than you did. All right, so we see Jovanovic 3D checking in from Sylvania. Thanks for joining us. And Tom Toomey from California. Okay, reading through. Sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so we see Randy checking in from Texas. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see, hello, question about the sends. What is the correct to put down the level on the sends track or put down the volume on the effects channel, the difference? All right, so let's say I have, I'll just do new project here quickly. All right, and I'll just get a couple of...
Remember me.
All right, so let me just...
Remember me day after day after.
Okay, so let's say if we come here and let's say we have both of these going to a send effect. So I'll just send both of these to a reverb. Okay, so just rereading this. So what is the correct to put down the level on send track or put down the volume on the effects channel? So, when we look at our mixer here, we could go to our effects sends for each of the tracks. So if we have multiple tracks that are going to the particular send effect, so let's say I have this track and this track that are both going to the send effect. So if I wanted less effect on this but not affect the relationship here, that's when I would want to adjust the sends directly on the send, on the tracks. But if all of it was a little too wet, if I wanted to adjust the overall level of all of the sends, at that point you could just just bring it down, but that would bring it globally. So if you're doing it on one track, it may not be as big a deal. But if you have that effect send going across multiple tracks, which is generally why you would use an effect send, at that point it makes sense to kind of probably do it on the individual tracks, so you could adjust the send levels there. So that adjusting the gain on the effects end or on the effects return channel doesn't affect everything else. So I'd say if you're doing multiple tracks, probably use the sends within the tracks, and then if you want to reduce the overall reverb, then adjust the gain on the effects return channel. All right, so we see a question. I turned a friend onto Cubase, but she can't get audio to play on MacBook without interface. Any link that could help her? So really all you'd have to do is, I'm using it right now, is just come over here to your audio system and choose built-in audio. And then, give that a shot. And that should probably, do the trick. So sometimes the sample rate on some MacBook Pros, like the headphones, I think that there's some MacBook Pro models where like the headphones will only work on certain sample rates. So, so check that out as well. But all you have to do is set it to built-in audio, and that's what I'm using currently. All right, so we have a question. Can you show us how chord detection works in Cubase 12? Yeah, so let's go take a look at it. So we can do it for audio or MIDI. So if we wanted to come over here, I'll just go to this particular project. And I could take just an acoustic guitar track. So let's say if I would just want to take this guitar track here, all I need to do is to just drag that particular file to a chord track. And then that would automatically populate the chords for you, just like that. You could also, if you have it for MIDI or for audio parts, we can come over to the project and we'll say chord track, and then you could just say create chord events from the selected events, and you can choose multiple events if you wanted to, or with audio just drag it to an audio file directly to the chord track. Okay, so we see a question. Does Cubase 12 Artist have a separate loudness widget to monitor dB level of sound from your monitors? And how do you brighten the numbers behind the meters? I can barely see them. So, you know, there's nothing that's going to like do a loudness correction, like a loudness or loudness measurement of what's coming out of your monitors. So there's nothing in Cubase that does that. There's probably some plugins which will do that, but that will involve, realize that when you do that, that's going to probably, there's a lot of variables like, the input stage of the microphone that's being used to measure, that's going to make a big difference. So if it's going kind of back into the system, realize that, the mic pre of the measurement mic, the gain, the input attenuation, if there's any within the software. So that's why it's generally not done in a DAW, because there's so much, what the level is on your speakers, so, Cubase can spit out, a known, reference level kind of, if we wanted to put like a test tone, we could set it to -12, and then you could set the monitoring volume from there. But once it goes out, the loudness of your speakers, the gain, the loudness of the room, the loudness of the measurement microphone going back into the system. So that's a lot of variables kind of outside of Cubase. So a lot of people will use a simple dB meter. A lot of people will use a dB meter on cell phones. Some of them are pretty accurate. I know some people spend a lot of money and find it, not a huge difference in accuracy from like an inexpensive metering app that are all kind of a barometer. So there's nothing in Cubase that once it kind of leaves your converter that it does to measure the overall, loudness level. So let me know if that makes sense. VTX Rudy. All right, so we have Camille checking in from the Czech Republic. All right, so we see, hi Greg, can you please make a comprehensive YouTube video tutorial about the score editor for beginners, typical project settings, MIDI and note input, export, title, and so on? Thanks. I could create one. So I did one. It's kind of, I've done one on kind of like getting started with the score editor, but there's probably some things that have been added in subsequent releases after that. So I'll try to put one together. Thanks for the suggestion. All right, so we see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Thank you for joining us, and Soren from Sweden. All right, so Michael Teams has already started dispensing virtual ice cream, so that's great. All right, so we see David Reuter and Kristen Precy from Big Tent Productions, great songwriting group in Nashville. Thanks for joining us. All right, so I just see comments. I'm not sure if it's a question, but it says a real recorded kick drum setting the threshold for MIDI notes to match the 16th notes. So let's see if I still have that file. If we come over here to all right, so say if I look at velocity here. All right, so let's say if I wanted to take, so I'm not sure if someone wants to actually trigger. So let's say if I have this with different velocities, and let's say if I had, and I'll just render this in place. So we'll turn it into an audio file. I'm going to activate the project first. All right, so we have different velocity changes here. So I'm going to just do a quick render in place. Okay, so now if we wanted to, let's say we go to our hit points. All right, so I'm going to, at this point, we'll adjust our threshold down. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to create MIDI notes, and we could retain, once we have hit points, we could retain the dynamic velocity. So now when we look at the particular notes, we could see from our newly created track that the velocities from the kick drum have automatically been carried over. We can see how they match up to the velocities there. So we could, so if you wanted to retain the dynamics from a real audio recording and capture that velocity data, you're able to do that just by, going to within the audio recording itself. And this could be for, any recorded file, and just go to the hit points. You could adjust a threshold accordingly, and then come right over here and create MIDI notes, and then choose dynamic velocity, and that will translate the dynamics into velocity. Okay, so Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. All right, so we see a question. I still have Cubase 8.5. Unfortunately, does version 12 run more smoothly, or does it bog down the CPU more? So I think if you run the same projects, you'll find that there's going to be more efficiencies that have been introduced over time, especially if you have more multi-cores. If you have a lot of CPU cores, there's more support for that. And if you're running on, let's say, an M1 Mac, it's obviously optimized for that, so that could make a difference as well. But I think if you're running the same projects, that you would notice very similar CPU performances if it's kind of an older project. All right, so we see a question from VTX Rudy. How do you brighten the numbers on the meter levels? I could barely see them. All right, so when I go, sorry if I didn't bring that out. So let's say if I'm here and we were just kind of playing back a project, so let's say we'll jump over to this, so we have some more meter activities. And I'll just bring the control room down since my audio is sounding weird, but we should be able to kind of see. So I didn't change anything, with the meter colors here. So for the numbers in the background. So these are all just kind of standard default settings. One thing, maybe it might look different if we go to, I'm not sure if it's different if you go to preferences, and let's say we go to track and mix console channels. So let's say maybe if the mix console channels aren't color, so maybe if it's not colorized, or maybe it's the colors of the tracks that you're using. So say if we wanted to mix console colors, so let's, if we come over here, but it's really just all kind of the standard. I didn't change anything there. You may want to check the color strength as well and see if that is, maybe if we come here and we adjust the color strength down. But it all kind of seems, let me know if it looks different. And if you want to email me like a screenshot of what your meters look like, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de, and maybe I could take a quick look at what you have going on with your particular meters and see what it looks like on your screen. All right, so we see question from Greg Malik. What are the downsides of upgrading from Cubase Pro 11 to Cubase Pro 12? I already know that VST2 plugins will not work. So VST2 plugins will work. They just won't run natively if you have an M1 processor on Mac OS X. So if you're running an Intel Mac, or if you have an M1 Mac, you could run in Rosetta and the plugins will still work. They just won't run natively. And on the PC platform, there's no change to VST2 plugin support. It's only if you're running on an M1 native processor and you have an M1 processor and you want to run natively, that the VST2 plugins don't work. But other than that, you just get a lot of great new features. So no downsides. All right, so we have Stephen McCormick checking in from Buffalo. Thanks for joining us. And we have Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. All right, so I think I might be at the end of our particular questions. Let me just check on my other. All right, bear with me. I'll mute that. Okay, so we had some questions that were sent in, so let's go ahead and get to those. All right, so we had a question, how to replace multiple instances of an audio file within a project at once. For example, if I wanted to replace a kick drum sample used in a project without having to do it one by one. All right, so we'll come over and take a look at an example of that. Okay, so let me just open up a project where we could show that. Okay, so let's say if I have a particular kick drum sample here, and that's repeated multiple times in a particular project. So let's say we'll just play this a little bit here. So if I wanted to replace every instance of that particular kick drum, I could come over to the media bay and let's just find like maybe another kick sample. Okay, so it'll just say, okay, like I wanted to replace that kick, like every time that that kick drum is used in a particular project, I want to replace that. So I'm going to just come right over here and I'm going to drag it over top of one of the files while holding down the shift key. And it'll ask me, do you want to modify all events that refer to the same audio material? And we'll say all, and then all of the different samples will automatically be replaced. So every time that that is used in a particular project, just hold down the shift key while dragging over, and then all of those particular files can be just replaced all at once. Okay, so we had a question. I would like to use the new AI functions in Backbone to replace all the drum sounds in a wave loop. What's the most efficient way to do this? All the tutorials I've seen show the replacement of one sound at a time. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll do new project. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just open up an instance of Groove Agent here. And let's open up an instance of Backbone. All right, so Backbone was updated a couple weeks ago to 1.5, which not only allowed you to utilize the new Steinberg licensing, but also gave some like AI functionality. So if you're not used to that, so let's say we'll find a quick drum loop. All right, and so let's just okay, so let's say if I want to take like this drum loop and replace a sound in it. So first off, I could take the particular drum loop just see if I get. I'll just add a new instance. Groove Agent SE here. Okay, so let's say I wanted to drag, a loop onto a particular pad. So we could play that particular loop. Okay, and what we could do now is at this point, if we go to slice, our different loops, we can create slices, and then we could bring these particular slices, straight into so as we wanted to replace different components. So let me just see if I can make this just a bit louder here. Okay, so as we wanted to replace components, all right, so let's say if I wanted to replace that particular sound with something I created. So what Backbone 1.5 is going to allow you to do, and this is like if you want to make drum sample packs and make really easy money, all you'd have to do is to come over here and activate the drum GAN. And at this point, you could just say new. We'll just kind of choose a particular layer, and this will just randomly generate a particular sound. So if I just wanted to play, so let me just come over here, go to the Backbone. So we'll have this, and let's say, okay, we'll just choose to randomize the particular sound. So we could have kind of our random sounds. And if I wanted to bring in more snare or more cymbals, or you could just completely randomize the sound directly there. Now, if we wanted to replace within a drum loop, so what I would do is just take this particular sound and drag it over into a pad. So let's say, okay, I want to do to audition, you know, this kick drum. I can now just drag the sound directly over into Groove Agent. So if we have a loop, at that point we could now just kind of play back and let's say if I wanted to just kind of pick a different sound, I could now again just take this from Backbone and just drag it to the Groove Agent pad. So as we go back and listen to it again, and I could have different variations on that, and we could have new variations. So, and you could audition this within Backbone, but if you want to hear it in context of the loop, so here we go again. So we'll listen to what comes up. So that's how you could kind of use kind of the AI functionality. So instead of like having to come up with different samples, what you're able to do is to just, you know, come right over here and be able to, you know, audition the different Backbone instances. So we could, you know, choose to do this. And as I would just play the particular loop, I could just say, okay. And this is just through AI neural networks. Just coming up with and if we wanted to have, you know, different variations, and we could refresh it. And we just say, let's do new. But if we had a particular sample that we wanted to use as the basis, if we come over to our media bay here, we could just take, let's say, you know, any sound. And now I could use that as the basis to do different sound design. So if I wanted this to be, let's say, a kick, I could drag a kick drum over, analyze that sound, and now we're able to do just variations on that particular sound as we wanted to as well. So we could just say, okay, it's even just do completely new variation. So it's a wonderful tool for coming up with very fast and easy, you know, drum replacement. I want to take this, do an analysis of it, and now we could just start to play around with it and do your drum synthesis. But within Groove Agent, I would take the sound from Backbone that you've created and just drag that directly to the Groove Agent pad of the different sources that you wanted. So, and you'll see just right here on export that you could just drag different sounds and replace it within the loop. So let me know if that works for you, if that's what you want it to accomplish. All right, so we had a question. Hi, I ran into an issue this morning. I'm sure it's an operator error, but not sure how to fix it. I have a MIDI piano event where I was sketching some ideas. I tried multiple pianos to roll out the plugin, keyscape, and a contact instance with the NI's The Gentleman. When I hit play, my sustain pedal C64 seems to be latched. The notes play with sustain until I tap the sustain pedal, then it goes back to normal. If I hit stop and play again, the sustain pedal latches again. I was thinking I needed to do a MIDI reset, but I'm not sure. I'm using Cubase 12 Pro on a Mac. It had been working fine just prior to running into this problem. I created a new keyboard shortcut to activate the pre-count count in. Thank you. So a couple of things that I would look at is, one, if you go into your studio setup, it could be wherever your piano controller is set to. Make sure that your piano controller isn't set for a control surface or generic remote. So sometimes, it could be like a generic remote function where you hit the sustain pedal that it does a function in the program. Sometimes, it's sustain pedals can, have a polarity, and they could, there's some of them will automatically be detected. Some you may have to have a particular switch depending upon the controller that you're using with that. So I would see if, let's see if there's, I'm trying to think, so it could be, test to see if like when we go to a particular instrument track, so let's say if we go to the instrument track, so see what happens on that particular track. If you go to your MIDI inserts and go to MIDI monitor and make sure that it's actually, and then if you press the sustain pedal, I don't think I have mine hooked up currently, but if you press the sustain pedal, make sure, see what MIDI information is coming in here. And make sure that it's transmitting the correct MIDI CC that you're expecting. It should be CC64. Another thing that it could be is if you use MIDI inserts, there is a MIDI plugin called, we go to MIDI control, and here we could say, see if there's anything set, if you have MIDI plugins, see if you disable those. Sometimes, people could have this set for, okay, I wanted to have CC64 turned on, and let's say a value of, 127, and then it could start, by transmitting a particular MIDI message. This could, and we had a discussion last week on this, I would also, see if it does it for every single part. And while you're doing that, take a look in the list editor. So let's say if I have a bunch of MIDI notes here going on. And let's say if we go here to our sustain pedal, so let's say we just have different CCs going on. So now as we want to look at this, also look at it in the MIDI list editor. And this will kind of show you every single controller. So you see, like we see that we have our, controller 64 here. So look to see if there's any other weird MIDI information besides notes and sustain pedal. And then you could see if it's kind of within that particular part or not. So you could see if it, does it all the time or if it's only with particular tracks. And you could always use, if you hit Alt or Option plus the letter K, it just doesn't have a sustain pedal, but see if you record through this, if you get the same behavior. And sometimes, I've seen, some controller keyboards will auto sense the polarity of the sustain pedal. So often it will, like when you turn the controller on, it looks at the sustain pedal as being up as opposed to being down. So, you know, see if you go again into like, you know, the MIDI, MIDI inserts and come over here to the MIDI monitor. If you see the sustain pedal information come in as you hit the particular sustain down, and see if that makes a difference. So those are some of the things I would check. Okay, another question mailed in. I'm using Cubase Artist 11 with a UR22 Mark II. When I'm recording an acoustic solo guitar piece, I have a mic track and a DI track. How do I set up the project so that I can hear the metronome click but no guitar sound at all through the headphones? I can hear the acoustic sound of the guitar naturally without it needing to come through the headphones, and there is no backing tracks as it is a solo piece. I used a mix knob and phone knob to keep the levels low as possible to hear the click and don't have the monitoring buttons on. I tried lowering the faders on the 2 tracks and thought that there was no guitar sound coming through the headphones, but there is at a low level. I would like to be sure there isn't and only hear the click. Is there a good way to achieve this? Is this easier to do in Cubase Pro with the control room? So I think with the UR22 Mark II, you'll have the mix knob. And the mix knob, when it's in the center, allows you to hear the backing tracks, like the tracks that are playing back, and the tracks that are being recorded. So we could think of this as almost like a like some more advanced interfaces will have like direct monitoring, like the UR22C or the UR44s, because they have built-in DSP. But with the UR22 Mark II, what you'd want to do is, like, if you turn it all the way to the left, you don't hear the mix knob. You turn it all the way to the left, you don't hear the backing track, but you hear your guitar, so without any latency. So you kind of choose to monitor the incoming source, and if you wanted to blend in the backing tracks, you would just simply move the knob all the way from the left, like towards the right, clockwise. So what you want to do with the UR22 to only hear the click track is just turn the monitor mix knob all the way to the right, and then you're not going to hear the tracks if they're record enable and monitor, if their monitor button isn't enabled, and you'll only hear the click track. So just move the mix knob all the way to the right, and that should do the trick for you. Okay, and our question, see, my question is how to copy inserts over from one channel to another. I'm aware of the main ways of achieving this, but I got asked frequently if there's a way to copying multiple inserts with information to multiple channels. I was like, sure, of course, Q-Link, etc. Issue is it's not working with Cubase 12, bug, or lack of feature. Example, user has a project with 30 plus tracks. They have one track with EQ, compression, etc. Those have generic settings like high pass filter, little glue. I want to copy those inserts with those settings to the other tracks to get me started. So it's copying inserts already on a track to other tracks with settings. Things I have looked at: holding Alt to copy inserts from one channel to another channel over 30 tracks and individual inserts, using copy first selected channels. It does copy the inserts to all channels selected without Q-Link active, but also copies volume, panning, routing, etc. Using a load effects chain preset to individual channels. Again, it's individual. When using the Control V function from the mix control, it automatically defaults to copy the first channel's information if you right click and copy the inserts information. If I copy the insert chain and right click paste on multiple channels with Q-Link active, it only copies inserts to one channel. I would immediately thought this was the way to go workflow. I hope this is not a preference bug, as I don't want to delete them. Help me, Undo Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. So there's probably not a real good way, because sometimes when you copy and pasting to multiple destinations, can be a little tricky overall. So I'll just do a new project here, and I'll show you a trick, an easy way to kind of get this done. So it may not, replicate all the settings to 30 tracks, but I don't think it's too bad. So let's say we have, let's say 8 audio tracks, and I have an effects chain, let's say on my first track here. And let me just get rid of and all right. Okay, so I'm going to add different effects here. Okay, so we have a number of tracks. So I know that, what they want to do is to be able to kind of take, and let's go ahead and I'm just going to change my panning here on this particular track. And I'm going to set my volume level low. So if we kind of select this particular track and we do, copy first selected track settings, and we come over here and we paste 2 selected tracks. So let's say I'll copy this. And let's say we paste to these particular tracks. All right, so we'll notice that the inserts will get carried over, but also the volume and panning, which is not what was wanting to happen. All right, so what I want to do now is let's go to so if we just want to copy the inserts, so, with QLink, it's not going to paste to multiple tracks, but a quick way of doing this is just to grab your inserts here. If you just grab the preset management and just drag it over. I know you have to do it, multiple times, but it's really, not the end of the world to just be able to kind of replicate all of the settings just like that. So if you just go into Mix Console and just over the presets, and if we wanted to just undo, so at this point I could just drag, these particular, all of those plugins with all of their settings, and then we could just replicate that directly over to the particular channels just like that. So I know it's not where you could select multiple tracks. I haven't found a way. I don't think there's any way of doing it in the Project Logical Editor. I'll just take a quick look just to see. Yes, I don't know. Let's see if we come over here. I don't think that we could set the inserts directly, so we could bypass inserts, but not a way of populating the inserts that I know. So I would maybe give that a try and see. if that would do the trick. So. All right, so let's go back to some of our live questions. Sorry, I just did an OS update just this week, and now my window behaviors are different. Sorry, I'm just gonna change my. All right, so let's go back to our live questions. All right, so we see from John Costigan says when my Cubase 11 Windows 10 creation station was repaired, the 2 hard drives were reversed. Can I just change the drive letters and labels, i.e. E equals audio, F equals library? So I think so. I don't think it'll be a problem. But you could always, if not, you could always just, I think you should be okay. Maybe Jazz Dude could comment more on that. I haven't done that in a long time. So. Okay, so we have a question from Sable Winters. Greg, please demo best practices for recording lanes. Okay, so we'll just kind of show just a little bit here. Okay, so really anytime that you would record over kind of like an existing area. So let's say if I wanted to do multiple passes on a vocal, I could put this into cycle record, and then we could just kind of open up the lanes here. So I'm going to just hit play, and let's say we record. Then every single time that we go into a new cycle, it's going to create a new lane for us. If we're not in cycle record, so say I just take it off, and I still keep recording directly on this particular track. So say I just want to do a punch. All right, and I wanted to do another recording. So if I just come here. So now all of these, every time that we record directly over, we could just see the particular lane. So if we wanted to see all the lanes when we do this. Now, even though like when we did the cycle recording, an interesting thing is it looks like it's actually different recordings, but what it's actually doing is it's one single contiguous recording that just kind of basically would go out over time. But, since we've recorded it into a cycle, we can see that this will be the first part. And instead of going linearly to the right, as it cycles back, it places that recording directly in the correct time area so that it would play back the recording to the backing tracks. So again, to see the lanes, and if you don't see this little lane icon, you could just right click and choose to come right over here and say, go to track controls settings. Let me just find it real quick. Track control settings here. And then if you don't see lanes, then you could maybe in the hidden area, you could just add it, and then you should see the little icon for lanes appear. So let me know if that's helpful, Sable. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we have a question. How can I duplicate audio parts like vocals and make them unique to start working on pitch correction? Everyone's single. All right, so let's say if I have a recording here and I wanted to, just do that. So let's say what I often do in that scenario. So if we wanted to, let's say this is the same audio file. It just plays this audio file here and plays this audio file here. So if I wanted to turn this into a separate audio file so that edits I make on this one aren't applied to this one, what you could do is just go to audio and go to bounce selection. And then you could replace the events, and then that creates a new audio file right there. So with vocal files, often what I do is I will come over here and create a track version. So I have a duplicate version. So, and then we could just name this, for tuning. And now, once I'm here, I could select the event and again, go to audio to bounce selection. Replace the event. So I go back to this is the original file, or this is my new file. So I have two separate audio files on the same track, and then I could do my very audio editing. But, probably the best way, what I do, so I could always just jump back to the original. I could just say, okay, here's my original track, and this is the one I'm using for tuning, that I would just select it and go to bounce selection, and that would create a new audio file. So you have the original file intact, and then you could have a separate file for all of the vocal tuning and processing, and that way you could easily jump back and forth. So if someone wanted to say, if you wanted to just switch in real time between the tuned and untuned vocal, it's just a matter of switching the track version. All right. See Gareth for the drive letter question, and Gareth is just saying using the disk management in Windows. All right. All right, so we have PZone36 joining us. Thanks for being a part of the live stream. And it's wonderful to see Gareth on the live stream. Excuse me. All right, just kind of reading through some of the different questions here. All right, so we see a question, is Backbone in Cubase 11? So Backbone is a separate instrument, and I think it might be part of the summer sale. I know it was on sale when the 1.5 came out, so it's a separate product. It's also part of the Absolute 5 collection. Okay, so we see, so Greg, any way to deactivate all active automation tracks at the same time and reactivate them again, and how to hide all those automation tracks at the same time? Okay, so let's say we have a number of tracks, all right, and we have a number of automation events going on. All right, so let's say we have, just too many automation tracks at once. Okay, so as we look at this, and we'll just, I'll just close down the lower zone. So we have all of these automation tracks. So if we wanted to hide, if you go into if you hit F6 or you go into your automation panel right here, at this point, you could just choose to hide all your automation or show used automation, or you could say, I think there's a, show used on selected tracks as well. So if you wanted to hide all of your automation or show used, you could just open it up in kind of one button. So, and again, just say boink. So that's how you could hide. Now, if you wanted to disable automation on tracks, so all you'd have to do is to say, go to the project logical editor. So right now we see that these are all, going to read automation. But let's go to the project logical editor, and let's go to setup. And we want to just say we want to transform for our function, and we'll say our container type is equal to a track, and I think let's say insert, and we'll go to track operation. We'll say so read, and then we want to disable. So let's see if we see our read status disabled on all the tracks. So I think that you could even come over here. Let's say if we wanted to write or read globally, you could do that. So you could just click there and be able to do that. Or if you wanted to do it with a keyboard shortcut, you could do a logical editor, and the logical editor is, once you get into this, you could also say, I just wanted to turn off automation on selected tracks. So if these tracks are selected, we could say, so I'll just select these two. So we could set another condition. Okay, container type is equal to track, and property is set to it is equal to is selected. So now I could only turn off automation on selected tracks and not on unselected tracks. So let's say so now only or we could just have this toggle on selected tracks, but not on other tracks. So those are some of the things that you could do. So let me know if that's helpful. And then if you wanted to even do a post process, we could just say, you wanted to turn all of this off, and we could do a post process here. And let's go to automation, and we could just say hide all automation tracks. So at this point, we could say, okay, I want to toggle those particular states and then hide all the automation tracks if you wanted to. So that's some other stuff that you could do as well. So let me know if that's helpful. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button so you get a prize. All right, so I just see Fab Filter, Cubase collab would be amazing. The EQs are okay. I think if you really, you know, come over here, you know, you'd find that the EQs maybe, you know, sonically are pretty similar. And if you wanted more control, you know, check out the frequency EQ plugin. So if you wanted to come here, so here you could have, you know, 8 bands of linear phase EQ. It's also dynamic EQ. So if you wanted to switch back and forth between dynamic EQ and regular EQ, you could choose this to be just for mid and side. So let's say I wanted to do the middle part of the panning spectrum and I wanted to get rid of the low end on the sides, or if I wanted to be left and right. And you could also just, you know, so if I want it left and right independent, we could adjust those. And what else is cool is while you play, you could just hear only the particular bands while you're tweaking it. So I think if you know, want a very kind of surgical EQ, you could really check out frequency and that you'd be very happy. I think a lot of people have kind of migrated to using frequency. Okay, it says my spectral layer 8 is not showing in the ARA edition menu. How to fix it, please? So I'm not sure if you're going to the extensions. So if we have a particular audio file here, you know, it should show up as soon as we go to extensions and see it there. So you should just see the extensions there, or we could do it, just load up the spectral layers directly here. So now when I double click on a particular event, that we could see kind of the spectral editing capabilities, or we could just put, if you're in version 12, we could just do the spectral layers directly there. So, but if it's not showing up, sometimes reinstalling the latest version. So if you could let me know which version of Cubase it is, and also, you know, if it's, you know, which version is spectral layers, but it should just kind of show up. All right, so we have a question. How to use a reference track without load it in an audio track of the inspector so that I can switch it in 1 or 2 clicks to compare it. All right, so what I would do is, let me just open up. Let me see if I have this project open I'm thinking of. Okay, I'll just open it. Okay, so obviously when we're using kind of reference tracks, we, you know, and many times people will have different processing on the master bus. and we don't want to necessarily take a reference track through the master bus processing. So that's often kind of, where people fall into problems, is as, they want to do different references that, if we have master effects, like let's say we have, frequency EQ, and we don't want to process and hear the reference tracks going through our master bus processing because it's really, not an accurate way of doing it. So I just have a audio track here, and I think kind of the best way of doing this is, so say, is just to take this particular track, and I'm going to just add, if you're in Cubase Pro, we come over here to the control room, and we'll just add a Q mix. So you could right click and you'll see add Q mix. I have this one set up, so I'm just going to call this reference in my Q mix. So we'll see like the little star icon. And what I want to do is to take a track where I have the audio file. And once we have the audio file here, we could just say, I want to send this to no bus. And I want to go into the particular track. And you could have this kind of set up in your template. Let's go to your Q sends, and I'll just send this to 0 dB. So now I could listen to and I'll just do a kind of a nasty EQ in this. So just to differentiate it. So if I wanted to listen to, the mix that I'm working on versus the reference, it's just one click. You could go back and forth. So this is now only the reference track. And now this is all the different tracks combined. So that way, just one mouse click, you can go back and forth between your reference track that's not being processed through the master channel and your mix track. All right, sorry, my chat just jumped on me, so. Okay, so we see from Diamond District Studios, it says, want to make a purchase for Cubase 12. Does anyone here have a discount or coupon codes they want to share with me? I'll be buying the competitive cross-grade. So generally you get so I don't think that there's any coupon codes that are available. I'm not sure what every district is doing, but if you get the competitive cross-grade, that's already, that's already at a discount price. So, but there's currently isn't a promotion going on, so. Okay, so we just see a question. This is directed to Best Korean Jesus. How often do they do sales, and when is the next one? So they haven't announced the major Cubase one. There's a lot of people that were kind of expecting it because generally with release schedules, there's one kind of around this time of year. But since the Cubase release happened in March versus November, it probably, that's why it's kind of not on the typical schedule because of, it's when the release date was. They kind of have it calculated, but I'm sure that there's always different promotions going on. So just kind of check back. All right, so I just see your mic has a little background noise, or is it my setup? So I'm not sure if it's my microphone. So my microphone has a little noise. My MacBook fan is kind of on and very active today. Some days it doesn't turn on, some days it does. So if it's that, or if it's a UR interface, so, you know, depending on the mic and how much gain you have and the source, you might hear a little bit of noise, but generally the mic pre's are very high quality. See, Gareth is indicating it's time to finally take the plunge and install Windows 11. So, see, Uncle Tone Beats says, checked in with Twitter, thinking it was normal YouTube video, and voila, live stream. Happy Friday, Cubase fam. So glad you could join us. And we have Vinny Sabatino. You don't have to worry about being late. We're glad to have you, Vinny. Hope you're doing well in Florida. All right, so we just see from Uncle Tone Beats, I'm still scared of the Project Logical Editor. It makes me feel like I'm a coder. So, you know, just think, you know, with anything that has flexibility, it's, you know, could be a little bit complex, but, you know, take one of the presets and kind of, you know, once you kind of get into it, and there's lots of, you know, Project Logical Editor functions that we've done that you could search in the live streams, but, you know, take a preset, you know, just record something, set up a scenario, and, you know, play around with some of the different presets. And once you kind of get the hang of it, it is, you know, kind of a wonderful, you know, incredibly powerful tool. So, and you shouldn't have, you know, once you kind of feel like, you know, once you use it a couple times, you're not going to feel like a coder. You're just going to feel like, oh, this is exactly, you know, like I've run into this scenario, and they're not going to, you know, and it's such an obscure thing that there's not going to be a menu function for it. You know, that's when you would get into the Project Logical Editor for different scenarios. All right, so we see, and I think this was going back to our lanes question from Sable. So it is a continuous wave. Just the graphic is split into lanes. If you delete the wave, they all disappear. Is that correct? So let's go ahead, just take a look. And I think this was maybe on, see if it's on this one. I'll just recreate it. I'll just revert this project quickly. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and we'll record on this particular track. All right, and we'll do just, you know, put it into a cycle record. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll do, so again, this will be one contiguous file. All right, so now when we look at it in the lanes, let's see if we erase one, if it will split it. But so we'll just erase that. But I think if we wanted to, take a look at this. So if we wanted to kind of see the whole thing, I think if we look at this and I think if we go to audio and let's say events depart, that now when we duplicate, I guess it just kind of still shows it kind of split up in the part editor. But let's say, so it looks like we could just take that and we extend it. But yeah, it is one contiguous file that will just kind of be looped over and over again. So, but it looks like you could delete it independently and it would just cut and erase that portion. All right, so John Costigan is saying, if you learned something from this great hangout and live database, click the like button. So. All right, so we just see from Kashmir Cat, thanks for joining us today. I have a very powerful new PC, however, the audio processing sometimes overloads it. So it could really depend, think of, a lot of times when we're dealing with, if you're doing a lot of instruments, like one of the things that people run into, let's say if I have, one audio track and on this track I have 16 plugins. That track is only going to utilize one CPU core to process all 16 plugins. And it's just how processor scheduling works. Or if I have one instrument loaded up and on that VST instrument, so let's say I have a lot of VST instruments, if I have like 16 sounds loaded into a single instance, that single instrument will be taking one CPU core and not spreading across multiple CPUs. So just be aware that, depending on how if you have 16 insert plugins on a particular track, that, that one track, depending on most of the systems and most plugins will not scale all those plugins across different CPU cores. So, and when you set up your projects like that, it could be problematic and, say, oh, I have a really fast computer, but, when I put, all these plugins on this one track, it's bringing my computer to a crawl. Where if you spread it across to multiple tracks or, ran a single instrument in one instance of a multi-timbral instrument, and you run 16 instances of that would spread it across CPU cores. Now, programs like Halley and Sonic SE are smart enough to be CPU, multi-core CPU aware. So I saw one new plugin format that was like their big, huge thing. It's like, oh, we could scale across different CPU cores. And you could do that in VST 3 already. So without any instances. And if you wanted to have like, MIDI 2.0 functionality, that was all basically derived from VST 3.5 instruments. So those things, you could check to see how you're loading up effects and how that's, and realize, and you could maybe adjust like routing capabilities so that you could better utilize multiple CPU cores. All right, so we see from DJ FK, what's the difference between bounce and render? All right, so when we bounce a file, it's just going to take a particular file and create that audio file, but create a new audio file from that. When we do rendering could include our insert effects, our panning. So if I wanted to come over here and, I have my insert effects, my send effects, my group effects, volume, all these different things. When we do a render in place, all the processing is included. But when we do a bounce audio selection, that won't include any of the audio processing or effects. It's just strictly creating a new instance of the audio file, but it's not actually applying any processing. So many people like will choose to do a render in place to free up processing on their particular system, because then you could render all of the effects and all the processing into the particular file, and it's just playing back an audio file, and the processing can be disabled automatically. So. See, Gareth just mentioning a great interview in Yamaha. So yeah, if you go to the Yamaha blog, they did an article on the Club Cubase live stream. So thank you, Gareth. It's kind of you to say. All right, wonderful to see Panos on the live stream. I believe he's from Greece, if my memory serves correct. All right, so you see that PZ136 has shared with me how to pronounce his name. So PZ136. All right, it's kind of like the Tom Hanks film, where The Wonders, where they spelled it Oneders, and everyone kept calling them the Oneaters. So, all right, so PZ136. All right, thanks for letting me know. All right, so we see Fab's just saying, Summer Cells are really great. Just got my new full version of Groove Agent that goes so well with 12.03 software. Don't miss out. So it's great. Enjoy your new tools, and start adding Percussion Agent into lots of your tracks. All right, so we just see from John P, is there a way to link the top tools with the lower zone tools? So generally not, because, as we look at lower zone tools, we'll realize that, there's different tools that are available. So when I go into the MIDI editor, there are different tools than what we see in the project window. So, as we go back and forth, if we had a tool selected here and that tool doesn't have an equivalent in the lower zone, then it, which is pretty frequent, then it's not going to, synchronize up, because there are different tools between the different editors and different zones. All right, just reading through comments. Okay, so just seeing a lot of different comments from DJFK. It says, when you cut bars with automation or set a split at the first bar, Sophist, have to Google this one, thanks, or render ups. I'm so stupid. Yeah, so maybe DJFK, if you wanted to, just maybe get it all in one question, but I'm not sure if you wanted to, let's say for here, like if you wanted to cut a particular area out. I mean, if we just select, and then if I just wanted to hit like Control or Command Shift X on a particular event, I could get rid of, different events just like that. So, So let me know, whatever you want it to accomplish with that. All right, let me just go through. All right, so we see Captain Energy Music and from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Mitch Michelle from Michigan. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see from Vinny Sabatino, when I select a marker number in a project window, it's not moving there unless I press play. Please enlighten me. Worked yesterday. Okay, so we just add, let's do a new project here. Okay, so I'm going to add marker track. Okay, so, and let's go ahead and just drop. Okay, so let's say if I come over here, so there was some new functions. So let's say if now when you click on the marker, so let's say in Cubase 12, if you're in Cubase 12, there is, if you go to settings, there is a sync selection that's enabled or that you can enable. So make sure that that is turned on. And now as you click on the markers, so if you double click the markers, you could just navigate there, or if you click here, and let's see if I turn this sync selection off, if we just double click to go directly to that marker position. So let me know if that's what you're doing, Vinny. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, Greg and friends. Robert here, sending a lot of love from the sunny countryside of Croatia. Everyone make sure to smash the like button for Greg's amazing efforts. Thank you, it's very kind. All right, so I see when I drag my tracks into the folder, tracks will be, the tracks will be colored, but not the track header. Is there a solution? So let me just jump back to this where we have a folder track. Okay, so I'm going to drag track over. Okay, so when I dragged it over, so, all right, and I'll just do a longer file that we could see. All right, so I don't know if a way for it automatically to, change the. So let's see the tracks. So let's say if I drag this into the folder, it's maintaining the same colors here. So, I think that we could select all the tracks in the folder and colorize all of the tracks, but I think that the tracks will maintain their first color, but it could also be that it may take, let's see, as we drag tracks in, if it just goes to the next color of the folder, and this could be tied to preference. When we come over here to preferences, we will, if we go to track and mix consoles, so it could be maybe if we had this set to use tracks default color. Let's see if I drag this in. Okay. Or let's try a different preference setting there. Use the previous track color. So I'll drag this in. So yeah, so now if we come here, we could just say, try using, if it's creating a new file, try to go to preferences, to user interface, to track and mix console channel colors, and set the auto track channel color mode to use previous track. So now that I have that, anything that I drag and drop, if I say use previous track +1, I drag a file in, it's going to increment and add to the next color and kind of cycle through the particular colors. But if we want to undo that, we could just, again, change that preference to use previous track color. So let me know if that helps. So now when I drag it in, it'll still maintain the same track colors like that. All right, so we have a question from Razel from Denmark. Thanks for joining us today. It says, in the media loop and samples, some library is missing, like raw power library, but I have them in Cubase 11, but not in Cubase 12. Something missing in my Cubase. Thanks. All right, so let's say if we wanted to come over here to raw power. All right, so a lot of the raw power ones, make sure, so this is a combination of, audio and MIDI parts. So, but, so make sure that, one, that that you don't have it set to just MIDI or just audio, because you might be hiding different aspects. And if we go, something else you could do is if you go to the media bay, and once you're in Cubase 12, go to VST Sound, and you'll probably see raw power in here. And it can't hurt to go into the raw power folder here and just right click and rescan the disk and see what shows up there. So say, okay, let's look at all media types. So then you could see everything right there. So, but it can't hurt in Cubase 12 just to rescan the disk. And once you hit F5 to go to media bay, just come right over here. Let's go to, again, to media menu, to media bay. You'll see the VST sound. So click in there and scroll down alphabetically to raw power. Right click on the folder and rescan the disk and see if that brings it back for you. All right, so we see a question from Vinny, CC 121 replacement, any time frame? So yeah, the replacement hasn't been announced, so there's no time frame when the product hasn't been announced yet. So see, great comment from Best Screen Jesus. Logical editor should show you that anyone could be a coder. So it's a great way to look at it. Okay, so we have a question from Rob. Hi, Greg. I have my Groove Agent pad set up to individual outputs that show in my mixer, however, do not show in my project window. How do I activate them to show in both? Okay, so let's say I come over here and I have a Groove Agent instance. All right, and I'll just start activating. So we see our Groove Agent instance here, and I will just start activating different outputs. For output 3, we see these growing. Hang on just a second, let me talk to my son. All right, sorry about that. So we see that my mixer is growing as we add these particular outputs. Okay, but we don't necessarily see these on the project window is what you're not seeing. So we have these in the mix console, we see them. But now when we come over here, all you have to do is like click like you're opening up automation lanes. And as we do that, you'll just click right here, and then all the outputs will show on all the outputs for the instrument will show directly there. So just as soon as the outputs are activated, just click again in the lower left-hand corner like you're opening the automation lanes. And then at that point, you'll see all the outputs become visible just like that. So let me know if that helps, Rob. See, John Costigan is a fan of Gareth's compound diphthongs with textual alliteration. So I'll have to look up diphthongs. All right, so we see Spike Williams checking in from Wales. All right, and we see the PZ136 says no problem with a smiley face. So I'll have to try to cement that into my memory. But in all fairness, I think a lot of people would say P Zone 36, but I'll try to remember. Thanks for letting me know. All right, so we see Uncle Tone Beats going to play with the Project Logical Editor today. So once you get into the like Logical Editor and Project Logical Editor, you get to be a real kind of power user. Okay, so we have a question from Best Screen Jesus. Is there a way to make the arranger track align to grid regardless of tempo changes? I wanted to behave like events in musical mode. So it's like on the grid. So let me just go ahead and open up a project with some. Let's see if I have the project open. All right, here we go. This has some arranger tracks. All right, so let's say we have, all right, so we have our arranger track here, and I'll just add a tempo track. I don't think we have one in here. I guess we do. Okay, so let's say we have tempo track here. All right, and this may not make any sense musically. I'm not sure if everything is set in musical mode or not. So let's go ahead and I'll just activate the arranger track. So let's go ahead and play. Sorry, my audio is just, my interface is. My interface started misbehaving like 10 minutes before the live stream. All right, so it looks like it's going to automatically follow, I think, when we think of the arranger track, that it's going to automatically follow all of the events in this particular time. So if we have tempo changes here, that it's going to follow those tempo changes for each of the sections. And as it gets flattened or repeated at that point, it's basically taking this moment in time and kind of replicating it. So I understand the desire for kind of having that be more dynamic, but let's say if I was just kind of playing along, and if your track is in musical mode, so I went to 12 beats a minute instead of 120, that they will, if all the events are in musical mode, they will it seems like they will follow, but let's say and as we do this, we notice that the grid functions didn't change. So let me just, all right, and let me just see. And the one thing that you should check out is if you just kind of, scoot this over to the right, that you could have the arranger track toggle between linear and musical mode. So check that, Best Korean Jesus. So. See Gerald Ely just saying, oh, I just accepted that multi-outputs for instruments weren't in the project window. That's my mind blower for the day. Yeah. Yep. So that's where they're at. So I'm glad that you learned that and have a new trick. You see, Best Korean Jesus says, such a cool photo of Greg's command center in that Yamaha article. Yeah, so that's what my messy desk looks like. I probably should have cleaned it up a little bit, little trinkets that my son gave me. But yeah, it's a lot of stuff where I have like my little Microsoft Surface keyboard, or like that I'm reading the chat on, and the screen, and multiple controllers. So try to get a lot of things within arm's reach. So. All right, so we just see, hi, I was wondering, was there a Spectral Layers 9 sale? If so, I can't find it anymore. I think it ended, it might have ended yesterday, or it ended maybe just yesterday or the day before. So, so I think it may have just ended. So sorry about that. Okay, so we have a question from Hugo Stiggs. Is there a way to have audio automatically change to the project key I set, or do I have to always manually transpose the audio to fit the project key? So a lot of times audio files may not have a key that's set with them. So if we wanted to, let's say probably, I'll just look at a project that probably doesn't have any keys set in a particular file. And I'll just revert this quickly. All right, so if we want to, let's say if we go look at our pool window, let's see if we can set the key in here. Okay, so if we have the key set here, so let's say I wanted to take all of these files, and let's say our root key is A. So I think that and then these are set to musical mode. So let's see if we, as we're playing here. Sorry, let's see if I can get my audio just a little louder. So sorry, it's so off today. All right, so let's say if I now come over and let's say for kind of the whole project, so I think that once you have, you know, once you set the key there, that let's see, you know, and then if we wanted to, you know, transpose, but, you know, try just setting the key directly in the pool window. You'll see the root key and set it there for multiple tracks. And then I think it will transpose. You may have to manually do that, so you may not save any time doing that. Some content sets will have the key automatically set, but you don't necessarily need, you know, if you have like a transpose track here, I could just say, you know, so let's say, let's get to a transpose track that now, like while it's playing, if I wanted to go up, that you could just kind of change the keys. And if we wanted to go back, let's say down to our root key where we were, you could just do it kind of like that as well. Okay, so you just see from Cisco Fuentes, have you used a flock patch with Cubase? I'm trying to understand the routing and I'm lost as an Easter egg. Route as signal to external plugin maybe. One is mono, one maybe stereo. Says I could get the audio into Cubase and record to use it, but the recorded track out through the flock patch into whatever analog gear and back into whatever track as a plugin. So I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the flock patch, but if it's just getting it out to like a piece of, an external processor, you could probably just, set it up in the VST connections. So let's get to your VST connections. We'll get to audio connections rather. Sorry, using terminology from 3 versions ago. So when you go to our audio connections, just try and route it out to like an external, effects. And this way you could, tell it whatever output it's going to from your interface or converter directly back in. And then, once we go to activate that, we'll see inserts, and then you can say, okay, I want to get to my external plugins. You can say, okay, I want this to be my distressor, and you click here. That could monitor any of the delay paths that, any latency that might be encountered through conversion, or going out into the analog world back in, so that could compensate for that. But if you could let me know what the flock patch is, I could do some research, but it sounds like it's for maybe external routing, but you should be able to have any particular, external processor. Hang on one sec, my son's knocking. All right, sorry about that for the interruption. I'm back. You see that spectral layers, Jazz Dude is just indicating spectral layers 9 introductory discount at 20% until July 21st. So sorry if you missed it. And we're just seeing Jazz Dude just made a great point. Says if you have an old MIDI keyboard somewhere not used, can be transferred to new life as a key command macro trigger. So yeah, that's a great use. So. All right, so I think I'm at the end of questions. We'll see if there's more questions. Realize it's a very hot summer day and a Friday afternoon. Lots of people are on vacation. So we'll wait a little bit. There's all right, so just see from Cisco Fuentes says, thank you, I'll play around with this. It's such a cool piece of gear. It's a modern patch bay, but you patch with an app versus chords. No chords, you can use it like a plugin sort of, worth a look. So yeah, I'll kind of check that out. So in Jazz Dude just saying it's a digital patch bay. So. Okay, so we had a question from Chaser. I used to play in a band called Chaser in high school. Hello, is there a way to move tracks quickly without dragging it from top to bottom? So I know what. So there's a couple ways. I think. Let's see if there's one. I want to say that there is. All right, so I know what some people do is, like, let's say if I want this track to go to like here at the top, I know what some people do is come over to say, we'll go to like the invisibility. So we'll say hide selected tracks. Move this up and then show all tracks. And then, so that's one way if you have like, a zillion tracks in a project to move it up so you don't have to, just navigate. So, I know like people will do stuff like that to move up instead of just kind of dragging, between, 100 tracks. If you don't have the divide tracks feature, one of the things you could do if you wanted that to be at top. So let's say if I wanted, if you have this function right here, we could have a divided track list. So we could see, different tracks here. So I think let's say if I want to take the bass track and move it up, let me see, I think we could right click and toggle track list for that particular track. And then you can move it up to the top and then, move it down. So there's a couple of techniques. Hopefully that'll help. All right, so we see Finn Snake says, after 2 days of trying, I finally got past the create a channel thing. Hi all. So, well, thanks for joining us. So we see question. Hi, Greg. I was wondering, how do I enable Ableton Link? Thanks for these live streams. They're super helpful. So I don't think that Ableton Link is not a part of Cubase. So it's not a feature in Cubase. All right, so we see Michael Hurst says, hi, Greg, sorry, just joined. Did you see my email question about processing a whole wave in Backbone to change all the drum sounds with AI? Apologize if you already covered. So, yeah, we did cover that a bit. All right, so we'll just see if there's some more questions that kind of sneak in. And we will be doing our Zoom meetup starting, it'll be on next Friday's live stream. So that'll be the last live stream of the month. So we'll be able to, so we'll probably do 2 hours and then do a Zoom meetup for 2 or 3 hours. And once again, if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button so that as we are continue to do these live streams. Give it a couple minutes because I know there's a bit of latency by the time I speak to when it actually comes out. It's about 30 seconds at times. All right, so we just see how do I see more than one track at a time in the editor? So if it's, I'm not sure if it's a MIDI editor, but we'll go, if you want to do it in a MIDI editor, we'll show you that. So, all right, so if you want to see more than, you know, more than a single MIDI part. So let's say if I wanted to see like my piano strings and bass parts here. So I have like these three selected, and then I would just hit like Control or Command E, and then we could choose to colorize by part so that each of the parts would be a different color, and then whatever one that you wanted it to be active, you could just kind of say, okay, now I want it to look at the string part, or you could just kind of click and you could just activate different parts for editing just like that. So let me know if that's what you mean by seeing multiple parts, but it's just selecting the parts, then launching the editor. Okay, so we see question. When duplicating a track, is there any way to stop the parenthesis D from being created permanently? All right, so let's say if we come here and we choose to duplicate tracks, we see that we have this little, you know, appendix with the, you know, indicating that it's a duplicated track. But if we wanted to go to, you could go to the project logical editor, and let's come over here. And okay, we want to transform. And we'll say tracks. And then we go to rename. So we'll do name, and then we'll say replace, and we'll put, I think we do parenthesis D like that, and we'll replace it. Okay. Okay, so let's try replace search string D, and I think we could just put nothing. All right, so if we, so we see this this D here, so we just said, okay, we want to do container type is equal tracks name, and then we'll choose replace search string D, and then I'll just didn't put anything in there. So now anytime it sees like the parenthesis D, capital D with and parenthesis again, it'll just remove that from the name. Okay, so we have a question. What is the phase button / slider in the inserts tab of the control room for? Okay, so let me come over here. I'll just go ahead and remove. Okay, so right, so just seeing if I see the phase button you're talking about. There's the phase button slider and the inserts tab. All right, I'll just add an insert here. So I don't know where the phase button / slider. Maybe Rob, if you could indicate to help me out with that. All right, so okay, so he says just hold down shift to highlight more than one. So let me just come over here. All right, so okay, so we see from Carlo 109, how do I select individual tracks I want to see all together before launching the editor? So if you want to do this, whatever tracks you want to see, we could say, okay, I just want to hold down Control or Command key and say I want to see this track, these tracks, and these tracks, and then Command or Control E, and then they'll all show up in the editor. All right. So we see macros to group and bus drums based on file names. Okay, so let's say we'll jump back. So yeah, we do that in the logical editor. I think we could do it. So let's go ahead and all right. So let's say I have kick, and SN top, SN bottom. All right. So let's say I wanted to. And you could obviously have different naming conditions depending on, like, if you spell kick K-I-K or K-I-C-K. Depends if you had to write it in magic marker and fit it into a small channel strip on an analog mixer. But so let's create a project logical editor. Okay, so we'll say we want to select okay, so let's say we want to select tracks. So container type is equal to track, and let's say name contains, let's say KIK. And then here we want to set it in the Boolean condition from and. We probably want to set this to or. So say name contains SN. And let's say name contains hat. So we'll just come over here. So name contains hat. All right. So what we want to do now is to select all of those tracks. So we'll just okay, so we've now selected those particular tracks, and now we could set up a post process, and we'll just say create group. Let's add. Okay, so we'll say selected tracks to new folder and add. Okay, so right now, let's say I have my bass selected. So we'll just say we want to take this and add to a group. So I'm going to now hit apply. We'll give it a name. We'll say drums. And then all those tracks have now been routed to our drum folder. So we want to say, again, select the events. So we'll say our container type is set to track. We want to, the name contains kick, like KIK, SN for snare, hat. And on the Boolean condition, you want to just make sure that these are set to or, because otherwise, if it was set, which is the default, to and, it would be, okay, it's looking for the name of kick and snare and hat in one track instead of kick or snare or hat. And then once it's selected those tracks, add it to the selected tracks to new folder and group. So you could just simply, then I could assign it to a new folder track and to a group, or just select to a group track. So even if I wanted to do that, let's see if we go to add track, or it might be under mixer if I just wanted that one particular function, but that macro there is so give that a try and let me know if that works. I think you can get that to work for you. All right, let's see. I think we may have a couple more questions. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you've learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. Okay, so we just see removing the D parenthesis on duplicated tracks. Thank you for the solution. I suppose the real question is there any way from stop it being generated? So I think sometimes if you, as you're duplicating tracks, it's a good idea to have an idea that, the duplicated track, I don't think that there's a preference for it, but that there's an indication that it is duplicated. So let me just see if I don't think that there is a preference to turn that off, but I think it's a good thing to show what tracks were duplicated just so it's not confusing. Otherwise you have two tracks that are playing the same thing and there's no visual indication. So it's nice to have a visual indication of what the original one was versus what the actual duplicated one was. All right, so we see, would it be Control or Command to select tracks to appear in the score editor as well? Yeah, so the same thing. And you could even just, so if we wanted to jump back, we'll jump to this project. So if I want to take those selected tracks, so if you want to do it on the track level, it would be this Control or Command key as well. So if I wanted to now, take these individually selected parts, I could just, they're still selected here. Then I could go into the score editor and, be able to adjust my notation view. So if I just want to come over here, you could see your multiple parts. So, whatever, if you hold down the Control key, or command that you could see the entire tracks if you want, or if you just wanted to see, just, the individual tracks. But the control key will allow you to select multiple non-contiguous events for editing selections. All right. See, John Costigan, just for people who don't know, just a good point. If you wonder what Boolean means, it's an algebra term for like, and, or, not, equal to, less than, more than, equal, to show a way to compare stuff. So. All right. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that kind of sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. All right, so we just see for the duplication indications, that yes, I understand it'd be useful for many new users to have the duplicate D, but I would love to see an option in preferences to disable it with a warning if need be. Then people would complain about the warning. So, but I'll pass it along, and I always send a report of all the questions asked in the live streams to the product planning people. So. All right, we'll see if there's more questions coming. If not, we'll wrap up. Thank you, Gareth, for the kind words. Just indicated that many thanks for another great session. So you're welcome. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see Diamond District Studios. Any discount codes for purchasing Cubase 12? So, there may be promotions coming in the future. So if you need to get it now or wait a bit, but either way, you could, get it now and start making money with it. So. And I just see from Diamond District Studios would like to make a move from Pro Tools. So, so there probably already are. You should check to see if there already are, competitive cross grades. So, you could probably already get it at a pretty heavily discounted price already. Just through the competitive cross grade, and sometimes. Competitive cross grades, like they just did a competitive cross grade deal about 6 weeks ago that was pretty heavily discounted. So we just see from about the duplicate indications as thank you, Greg. So sorry for being a stickler. So now we understand it's, there's little things that are irritants and, but you could have one keyboard shortcut or one MIDI command that just takes care of it for you. So it won't bother you anymore. All right, so we see Filter Freak just saying thanks, Greg. See you Tuesday. If you're finishing, have a great weekend. So. All right, so we see Vinny Sabatino just saying, Greg, thank you for sharing your experience. Greatly appreciate it. You're welcome. So glad to be able to help people. All right, so once again, we'll make sure that we'll be doing this again on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. And we'll go for up to 4 hours, depending how many questions we have. If you want to send questions in advance, you could go to Club Cubase, send an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And next Friday, I think it's the 29th, July 29th, we'll be doing our Zoom meetup. And if you haven't been involved with that, it's I look forward to it every month. And it's just we all get together on kind of a Zoom session and all just kind of chat about different things. It's always find it. I'm always really enjoy getting to meet everyone. It's a real thrill, and it's great to see new faces. So if you haven't participated in one, it's a lot of fun. So we usually go for about 2 hours on that day, and then go for 2 or 3 hours in the Zoom session. So hopefully we'll be able to see everyone there and be able to meet some new faces. And with that, I guess we'll go ahead and wrap up. I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy. I'm just hearing too many friends getting COVID and stuff, so I don't want anyone to be ill, but everyone please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you back on Tuesday. Please take care. Goodbye.